I learned that you quickly have to assess periodically throughout the day or project people's strengths and weaknesses, and you have to be honest with yourself to vocalize them and also accept when someone is telling you that they need help, and just move on and just to get it done, and that we all are at different phases or different capabilities at different times.
For me, it was that everybody brings something to the table. We were a team that hadn't worked together before, didn't know where we're going, and at the end of the day, I thought we had some great ideas, lots of satisfaction, and it really was. Everybody contributed, everybody brought something to the table.
I learned that you can't just try to jump right to the finish. Sometimes you have to go through the process in a charrette, just throwing out ideas, running them by your client, running them by your teammates, and just what I learned worked well for me was just to try to keep drawing and throwing out sketches and seeing what stuck and seeing what to kind of put to the side.
I had never worked with such a tight schedule on something, and so I learned how important it was to stick with it and to not get hung up in areas and to move on to the next part when it came to that time.
In addition to Brandon's point, kind of a contrary to that, I learned that there's always going to be times when you're taken in different directions, either by client or by a finding that came up in your team, and to be willing to change directions if needed, or take a different path, all while keeping the end goal and the end result in mind.
I learned that at the end of the day, I learned that we all had the same challenges to overcome. For a long time, I felt like our group must be like having the hardest time, but at the end of the day, I realized everyone was having equally hard time.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway that I got from R&D Day was just to remain mindful that on a day-to-day basis we need to be practicing sketching and creating things and designing. And I think it's a challenge with a lot of the younger professionals that have kind of been brought up in this computer age to kind of get out of the details, and I think that's one of the great things about R&D Day is that it really brings everybody back to what architecture is about, and that's the design.
What I learned was that we can never really trust the client. Our group didn't necessarily have that issue. But yeah, like don't trust everything that the client says. Really investigate the reason.
I guess my biggest takeaway was the ability to come together to solve a common problem and really reinforce teamwork in such a quick day-long charrette.
I learned that if you have a perfectly rectangular garage, it's not restricted by mechanical, electrical, or circulation. You can build it with about, how many parking stalls did you get? 500 parking stalls in 2 acres.
Definitely the importance of coming prepared with questions that are going to help you get at a definite answer for a client. Understanding what to ask was the important thing I took from it.
For me, it was learning to be resourceful and learning and understanding where to look for answers when you don't have them.
For me, the biggest thing I learned was know what kind of the first steps are to make when a client proposes certain parameters for the job, and knowing how to take those numbers or parameters and recommend to the client whether the job's even possible.
I guess I would expound on what Jake said, just as far as, that's the biggest thing I took away, but it's also just the fact that it is more of a dialogue that happens. And a lot of times I think we just assume that it's like, the client knows what they want, we know how to get that to them. But in the starting phases of a project, it is kind of something that evolves into what we see when we actually go in for permits.
For me, it was the importance of having educational opportunities like this in our office. We only started doing R&D days this year. This was our second one, and having the whole office take advantage of a full day to work together, one, I think it's great for the experience of collaboration and getting to know the other people in the office. But two, I think it is really important and eye-opening for people to experience things they haven't experienced before and understand what some of the next steps might be as far as their role in the firm and moving up into leadership positions.
For me, the biggest thing I learned was the steps that we should have taken in the Charrette process. So things like how many units can we fit on a site, how we need to figure that out, the information that we didn't have but that we learned by going through the process. And also, I think I learned that we needed to get things on paper quicker, and we spent too much time doing other things when we should have been, putting the pencil to paper.